We're gonna dig deeper today about exploring emotional and mental aspects of bikini prep, or so to speak. By which I mean the social pressures, what actually happens mentally when you're trying to get that lean for somebody who's never done it. And then I think it's pretty much overly obsessive behavior to stay like that as long as you physically can, uh, which analogy would be like driving at high speed nonstop is just not probably advisable. But Scott, you're an expert. Tell me more about how does bikini prep affect women mentally, and we'll unpack slowly everything else from there.
The biggest thing that I see females I tend to find to be fantastic clients because they're very organized, regimented. They follow instructions very well. They don't like guys always think they know better and they're always questioning or even going over and doing their own thing because they think it's better. Women usually follow instructions well. And I think that's why so many of them are suffering because they're following terrible protocols to the T. And what you typically see is a dietary protocol that is just an extreme energy deficit, and they follow that for a very extensive period of time. And that has numerous consequences, and some of them are very slow forthcoming and some of them are happening quickly, but they're following the instructions, and typically the coaches just keep giving the same sort of protocols, and at the end what they're left with is an inevitable rebound physiologically, psychologically, and it oftentimes, I would say more often than not, causes a pretty vicious cycle that I'm seeing females stuck in and they don't really even know how to get out of it.
So when you say they are, well, I know women are crazy. It's easier to get results from women, but it's also very hard to kind of stop them when they get those results and they just want to carry on and keep going and keep going and keep going. What do you think is the main thing why uh, these emotional disturbances might occur? Is it because they get too lean and their like hormones get out of whack? Is it maybe obsessive behavior with we know that weight fluctuation for women will be more visible because they are smaller, so half a kilo there or will have completely different visual effects than to men. What is the things that can affect how they feel mentally?
I think it I think it depends on the person. I've often said and still believe that I choose my female competitor clients very carefully. I find that a female that has established a career, possibly even a family life already, tend to do a lot better with the entire process, including the completion of the competition, getting back to, like quote unquote normal life. Where if you get a 19, 20-year old, you know, she feels Christmas in her eyes. And I think that the social media pressures are being more of a driver than the actual competition itself and the attention they're getting. So I can't speak by any means on all of them, but I think a lot of them they're getting the insta likes, the attention from the opposite sex or whatever, and I think that's probably quite intoxicating in some ways. And I think that depends. Oh, maybe they're not used to that. Maybe they've come from a background where they weren't getting that attention. Now they are, like, and I've seen that. I've seen females change their physique in such a way that they're always saying that they never really had much attention from other people, and all of a sudden they get tons of it. It's probably very difficult to lose that again. So I think a lot of it is they're just tying into that, how they're being treated or viewed, and they're trying to keep that physique because looking a certain way has given them a certain amount of attention that I'm assuming they've liked or almost even become addicted to. Whereas the other flip of the coin, they're the ones that have already established things. They don't seem to have that same drive, and I don't seem to see that problem when it's done. They don't have that same obsession, and they are able to come out of the diet, come off the stage, and get right back to things, where the ones that are seemingly driven by more of an aesthetic or social things struggle more. But I'm not a psychologist, so I can't say that's what's going on, but I see that a lot.
What do you think could be a tool to kind of give a better approach in sense of not being obsessed with self-image? Would it be education about, hey, this is how it affects your health if you try to stay as lean as you can for as long as you can? Or what would be your go-to tool for somebody who is maybe trying to push themselves a bit too hard for a bit too long? Is there anything that you sometimes advise them, or you think, hey, maybe let's look at this thing. If you really want to make progress for next year, we need to give your body rest, and rest sometimes will mean you're not going to look like you look on a stage. And let's be honest, 99% of those people who post pictures on Instagram and whatnot, they don't look like that all year round. They look like that for a week, maybe, if they're lucky.
They absolutely, that's absolutely true. I mean, I've an aesthetic goal, I still treat it from a performance point of view in certain ways. So I set out to have metrics being marked or measured that are showing improvements in their strength or their ability to move certain things, or do something faster, depending on, what their goal is. I don't put it all strictly on how they look. I put no regards to their body weight either. I think what I think is important is setting the stage at the very, very beginning, and showing them the markers that matter for the goal, and then measuring those. And I found that even with an aesthetic goal, when they start improving their strength, females like that. They seem to really thrive from that. And then they start to want to push, and I want to lift this weight now. I want to lift this weight now. And it starts to become more of a push than how they look. And the look is all coming along for the ride, but now they're starting to focus a little bit more on things that are, in my opinion, more relevant, especially for long term. But it's hard to say. I think that if you go in with the mindset of, here's your 12-week meal plan of fucking chicken and green beans and fish and tilapia and asparagus, and ride this to the show, no carbs on the treadmill every day, they have no understanding of what's really going on. They don't know why they're losing weight so quickly. They think these foods have become magical. They think that this cardio has become necessary. They think all these things because no one's advising them otherwise. And then when they get to the finish line, they are dying to do something other, eat something else or do something else. And then the coach says, congratulations, you won, or whatever happened, go have a cheat meal right away. I think the connotation of saying cheat is terrible. But then they go off and they eat, and they just eat the way they're used to eating prior to that 12-week fish and tilapia and asparagus meals, and they rebound. Where I think if you set the tone from the beginning and teach them the understanding of energy, balance, how this is working, cardio is not magic, fish is not magic, it's not thinning your skin. It doesn't have to be certain foods, it has to be a certain energy balance. And then you can allow for more variety in their food choices and less obsessive behavior. They can go out and not have to eat Tupperware, food out of Tupperware. And if you can teach them what is really going on from a physiological point of view, I find that they're more understanding, less stressed, and the rebound is just, there isn't one. There shouldn't be one, within reason. I mean, if you push something extreme, like use a diuretic, you're going to get a rebound from water weight, but it's going to be no big deal. Like, females take diuretics during menstruation all the time. It's no different. It should be no different. But if we have starved you, depleted you, ground your body to dust on the treadmill, done all these things, and then said, okay, you're good to go, your rebound's going to be crazy. And you see it every time. And then you see this psychological, oh my God, the scale went up 15 pounds in 2 days. I feel this way, I feel that way. And then they're just stuck, and then they're worried. And then they right away want to start dieting again to get rid of it. And then the vicious cycle begins. And definitely the majority I've seen are stuck in that cycle, and they're not getting out of it. And they're not getting any help either. They just say, oh, you got to diet harder, diet harder. Oh, you're not trained hard enough. You're cheating on your meals, like all this nonsense. And like you said at the beginning, their hormones are being completely obliterated by this dieting approach. And then you hear these things like, have to reverse diet out. Well, if I put my hand in a pot of boiling water, do I want to fucking slowly pull my hand out, or do I want to get out of there as quickly as possible? The body's the same way. That deficit is causing adaptations, you want those adaptations to be stopped as quickly as you can. You don't want to slowly reverse them because you're just keeping yourself in that hot water. You got to stop right away. And so you're seeing all this nonsense that's just keeping them stuck constantly. And then they're becoming dependent on coaches that are causing the problem, from what I see.
Would there be any strategy for you to implement with women by changing their focus on maybe whom they follow on social media? Because if they follow bikini chicks all year round, they want to look like bikini chicks all year round. And very few of them actually show how they look off season, like very few. And if they do, more often than not, it's how can they don't celebrate it. They're like, or
Right.
get back into it and this and that. And you're like, you look amazing. Like, well, let's be honest, the skinny chick doesn't look good.
I don't really have a strategy that I'm aware of that's 100% effective because I don't know. But I just make them aware, like, it's like you said at the beginning, you can't drive a car with a red line at the red line all the time. You're going to blow something out. So you can't be dieting all the time. I point out that the women are using enhancements more than you think. I have more females using performance enhancing drugs than I have males. And I've always had that. They're doing it a lot more than people realize. And they're just very cavalier about it. Nobody really knows it's not a topic. They're not being accused of it either. So it doesn't even really come up. And I also point out, like, look at your social media mentors and look at their social media. Like, sometimes there's clues. If there's always throwback pictures of them on stage and nothing new, my guess is because they're not happy with how they look at the moment. So they're not showing you that. That's to me a red flag. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what I notice all the time. And then all of a sudden, if they are showing a new video or something, they're covered up. It's a hoodie. Hoodies are in style again, and the big fucking earmuffs on, and the hood's up, and doing a thing. 10 weeks out from the show, they're in almost nothing. They're training fucking half naked. But it could be in the dead of summer. They're covered up, and that's a red flag to me. And I think and I'm not saying it is, but I think it's because they're not happy with how they look. And I know quite a few females that is the case because I see them in person and I talk to them and I know, and their social media shows it. When they're in shape in their mind, they're showing their body off, and when they're not, they hide it. I don't know why you'd want to be that way. So I offer that thought to them to say, like, look at who you are possibly mentoring under or worshiping. They might not be the greatest example of what's actually going on. Instead, I'd be putting more emphasis on how you're feeling. I know it sounds like a cheesy, reason, but how you feel should be ranked very high on your priority list. If you feel like shit all the time, that's really not good. Every single time I get a female that's new to my approach of coaching, that's come from something in the past, like we've been discussing, the first thing they notice within a week is I have a little bit more energy. That just becomes almost disregarded because they don't have a six-pack yet. But that's like one of the most important things, because if you're feeling good energy-wise now, you're going to be able to start to improvise your training a little bit differently. Performance is going to start to go up. All these things are going to slowly improve. And I think that the whole 12-week, 16-week, or the 30-day challenge, or whatever gimmicky headliner people are finding or falling victim to, I think is part of the problem. I think that women want to be looking for a sustainable approach for long term, because the physique is constantly going to be improving, and that shouldn't just be the only driving goal, like how they look. It should be how they feel, like I said. And like I said, I try to get them to have performance goals. Like, yeah, you lifted that, that's really good, I want you to see if you can do this. And pretty soon after that, they start to look for those lift markers and stuff like that, and that helps, almost deflect or distract from the I look this way. And like, look at the, like, every bikini girl takes a picture in the same pose with their fucking leg behind them and on an angle and either ass. Like, I could do that. Anybody could do that. And they're in fucking pants that hug everything up, and the wedge is right up their butt crack. Like, it's all images. And I think of anybody, women should know these. They're the masters of camouflage with wardrobe. They should be able to see through these things. But somehow they get caught up in it, and they think that what these social media people are saying is the truth. And I think most of them are full of shit.
Yeah, it seems like most of them as well always chase fatigue and chase feeling tired in order to look good. When we both know it's not really the case. I personally I prefer making them a little bit athletic. I like throwing in some stuff that just makes them feel good all around. Not good for them in sense of how they look, but good that they can wake up and go for a sprint, for example. To me,
Right. And they feel good after they've done that.
yeah. So to me, how do you find a balance in getting someone for a show and then taking them out of that show and make sure that they still enjoy training? Because that's usually when everything starts to fall apart, and if you don't diet them down and like, oh, I'm gonna go to somebody else, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not gonna risk your health. If you want to go somewhere else,
Yeah.
somewhere else.
I think that's the crux, one of the crux, I guess. And I think that starts from the day one approach. I really lay it out on right in front of them before they even start that this is the process and it's slow, and I don't change the timeline for any reason unless it's, in my opinion, quite justified, like a wedding day or the Mr. Olympia contest. Like you have a date that can't be altered, I can understand. But if it's just because I'm going to go to the beach this weekend, I'm not on board with anything that's going to be jeopardizing the long-term plan. A few manipulations here and there, no big deal. But I think I know that if you set the stage where you're coaxing their body along all the while to the goal, when the goal is completed, they're not suffering like what we typically see or hear about. The rebound is not really a thing. And so they're not struggling in the same sense psychologically or even physiologically. And then I make it well known that we have to get body fat percentage back to X. And, we go from there. I actually have a female right now. Well, actually, I just had a girl won her pro card 2 weeks ago, her at the North Americans. And so her post show, whatever you want to call it, I said, go enjoy whatever you want Saturday night with your husband. Sunday, same thing. Monday, here's your targets. You meet them. I mean, I don't think it's a big deal. It's not a reverse diet. She's out of the deficit as of Monday. It's gone. And that's going to be the quickest way to get those adaptations to start to kind of correct themselves. And then we monitor what matters. She's in a category where all that matters is what she looks like. So her weight doesn't matter. I don't care what you weigh. Check this. And we keep it in track or check, sorry. And then we track it and adjust accordingly. She's driven, so she's not bored of the training. If it's a bikini athlete and she's serious about it, her training is not going to change that much, unfortunately. You're going to change exercises, but you're not going to change a targeted muscle because you're doing a very specific thing. If she just wants to look lean, then I would change up programming to keep them engaged. So it kind of depends on who you're working with and why. But I find that people that are very dedicated to this, like to say a bikini competition, they're very motivated, and I don't need to give them variance in their training to keep them going. They're doing that as an athlete should, a competitive athlete. Where this is just to look a certain way, then we change it up and keep compliance as high as possible. I think at the end of the day, compliance is crucial. But if somebody said to me, if you don't diet me down, I'm going to find another coach, I would be happy to let them find another coach because they'll be back. And it happens all the time. All the time. You say, are you taking clients again? And, sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not, or you don't want to.
Yeah, so have you observed that any particular group is more resilient to the social pressures than someone else? What I mean by that, maybe there is someone who has family, you kind of mentioned that they might be easier. Maybe somebody who trains around people who are more experienced and they see them day to day, that they don't look shredded all year round. Maybe their family are supporting them and whatnot. Is there any kind of environment that you see that is, let's say, healthier for you mentally to go through these changes? Because I think the most important things that we are trying to get across could be the point that you are not going to look at your best all year round just because it's not healthy. Your body hates it. Like being lean is not healthy in no way, shape, or form. I fight with guys all the time. I want to have six pack. Okay, you're gonna have six pack. You're not gonna have sex drive.
Mm.
They go like, "What do you mean? That's the only reason why I was gonna have six pack so I can get more girls." And you're like, "That's not how your body works. If you are shredded inside out, you don't have estrogen anymore because there is nothing to aromatize it anymore. It's like not gonna happen. Pick
Yeah,
one. You can't have
yeah,
both."
it's true. I mean, if the body is in a sense a starvation mode, it's not prioritizing sex and reproduction. So obviously those systems are shutting down to conserve energy. Um, I do find that demographic, but it's not one specific one. It's like I said at the beginning, like a female that's established herself in terms of either her career or her family. They're usually very good because they have priorities set, in my opinion, properly. Eating
So
chicken out of a Tupperware
there's
container is
more
not
than
their
one
priority.
point of reference that can value their being as a person instead of just looks.
Yeah, absolutely. They realize that, hey, I have this. These things are important. This is my goal, and yes, we can do both. But they're not driven solely by that goal because they have other things that have to be done, especially if it's a mom. Mothers are fantastic clients oftentimes because they understand life happens and they get it and they know how to work with those things because you can't avoid life hurdles. They are going to happen no matter what. But somebody that's so obsessed about getting that meal properly, getting it timed properly, all these things, they are fooling themselves. They're living such a like a sheltered life, or they have no real life experiences hit them yet. Nothing's really been realistic yet, that they think that everything's over if they miss a meal. But I think some of that comes from the coaching. I think it's driven to them that you have to eat these things, you have to eat at this time, it has to be this way, this way, this way, and they think that. And if they do anything outside of that, they feel like they're failing, and that sets a negative thought process, I guess, going. I mean, like I said, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know, but I see this with some of my clients that have come from that background. I have one client that has spent many, 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 many years with a very famous IFBB pro coach. Um, and that's what's happened. If she's not eating those typical bro foods, she feels like she's cheating and or failing. But you can't eat that all the time. If you ate that all the time, you'd run deficiencies somewhere. And if you're not checking bloods, you would never know until all of a sudden you don't feel good. You feel tired. You feel lethargic. Your sex drive is down. You can't sleep. You're anxious. All these things you don't know, and then you start going to hokey pokey fucking places to see what's wrong. They're like, oh, we need to give you this vitamin and this herb and all these things, and you just start throwing variables into this mixing pot, and probably it stems from the nutrition being out of whack all the way back from day one. But you're so worried about eating something different because of weight gain that you don't, and then you're basically just keeping yourself stuck. I really don't know how to approach it because it's everywhere. All I know is that my clients aren't going through it, and I think it's because we guide them all the way from day one, and they understand why I'm doing what we're doing. I have a girl right now that was leaner right now, well, 2 weeks ago, than she was when she won an overall, and she's 9 weeks out from her show. And the show's not a big deal. It's not like a 1 a year show. It was just because she wants to get back going. And her immune markers are tanked. Rightfully so. We have her this lean. We pulled out of the show because it's not worth it to her. And I think that was the right call on her part. And so what we're going to do and what we've already started is, okay, like, here's your blood work. I see your hormones are this, your blood markers are this, your body fat percentage via DEXA scan is this. We have all this information that correlates to who you are physiologically right now. I want you to be a little bit more, I want a little bit more body fat on you. We have this range. Now we decide, what do you like the look of versus what does your health markers like? And we come to a compromise, and lo and behold, the health markers like what she likes. And I find that almost always the case. Women can look fantastic and be healthy. They can't look stage lean and be healthy, and they can't keep that all year round. But she can keep this look all year round and be healthy. She had to put on a couple percent from a physique that was very lean, and she can maintain that. But I think it's because of our approach has been very slow, very methodical, and it's just been coaxing the body and working with what we have. We have blood markers that say this. Well, they can't say that. Like, you can't let that be. So you adjust it, and once they're where you want them, and then you look again. And if that's where everyone's happy, then we keep that. It's very easy to maintain. It takes a lot of work to change something, but when you have it, it's simple to keep. Like, you could go to the gym 2 times a week and maintain your physique, but you couldn't go to the gym 2 times a week to change your physique. Like, you would have to put some effort in there. But once you've got what you want, it's simple to keep.
Yeah. So what you just said was like a misconception that they still need to run themselves in the ground to look certain way. And we all done that at some point. Like, I have coached people very horribly, just because I've gone through a lot of horrible experiences myself. Now I look back, it wasn't that horrible because I know what I'll never in my life do again.
Right. Yeah, it was a learning experience for sure. Yeah.
But
I think everyone goes through that. Yeah.
but I definitely stuck to everything, sweet potato, chicken, and broccoli and whatnot, and I looked phenomenal. But there was a year where I don't remember almost a month of my life. Just don't
Wow.
remember. Like, I just remember getting in a car, sitting down, and next thing, all my friends are shouting and screaming, and I have massive trophy next to me. I just want to show, and I don't even remember being in that show. I don't remember driving to that show. We already on way back home, and I'm like, "What happened?" They're like, "Oh, you looked amazing." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
So
Well.
so depleted. But at the same time, for guys, it's probably not as detrimental because for women, you have issues with bone density, then hair falling out, all those kind of things that men can bypass. You just shave your head and you live happily ever after, so to speak. Uh, and also, one thing you touched up on, how often would you run a blood test for anyone? And does it differ for someone who's trying to get bikini stage lead?
I think it depends on what they're doing in terms of supplements. Anyone, minimum to me is twice a year, minimum. Um, I think it's foolish and irresponsible to not know your blood. There, from that point on, if you are pushing things via aggressively training or aggressive drug use, something like that, then you got to check it more frequently. And you base that based on the periodization. Like, okay, we're entering a 12-week block or whatever block. We want to check bloods here, here, or here. And it kind of depends. The markers in Canada, it's hard because unfortunately, the medical doctors don't really play ball very well at all. Um,
I have to
I
send some of my Canadian clients to America just to get blood tests done.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I find if you communicate with a doctor and you speak with some, certain words and some intellect, I find that they're a little bit more responsive, but they still are going to do their bare minimum. And they're still looking at your bloods from an average individual, not from an athletic point of view. Blood work for an athlete should look different than blood work from the average Joe. I want to see certain markers, threatening ranges, depending on what you're doing, in an athlete, where I don't want to see it in an everyday person. So I think there's a very big gap between the blood work of a average Joe and the blood work of an athlete. And then we have the natural approach, which is the extreme opposite end, which for the most part is, in my opinion, more harmful than beneficial. But one thing that they are helpful with is they're very willing to give blood recs because they're very willing to show the world that they're not hokey pokey. So they'll do anything you're asking. And that proves to be beneficial sometimes because they'll give you the blood rec. Now in Canada, you have to pay for it if you go through a naturopath. If you go through your doctor, it's covered. So there's always this problem here, but it depends what they're doing. I would say that the more information you can get, the better. But females definitely want to have their hormones checked. In my opinion, they should have their hormones checked. They should have their ferritin and iron status checked. I would always have a CBC checked, like just to know where your red blood cells are and stuff like that. I think vitamin D is a good status. And I think if you're using enhancements, cholesterol is a good marker as well. And from there, it's going to be individual. But those things, thyroid also, that's part of the hormones. But from there, it's going to be individual. But that gives you a lot of insight on
Is there any
anything
blood
potentially.
test result that might show up that, you know what, you might mentally kind of start to get challenged. I don't really like this reading. Is there anything particular that might stand out and someone can pick up on it?
Yeah, I would be looking at cortisol levels could be a marker. Their A1C could be a marker depending on how they're eating. And then their I just totally blanked out here.
It sounds like more sex hormones than anything.
Well, the cortisol, the A1C for sure. From there, those ones are going to give indication. Vitamin D and iron. Sorry, I don't know why I blanked on those. Those ones would be very influential as well. The sex hormones, not so much, unless they were having irregular periods or something like that. I would look at something there. But typically, if they're menstruating regularly, there's usually, if they don't have any other symptoms, there's usually not going to be much of an indicator there. But if there's a menstrual disruptions or irregularities, maybe you want to look into something like that. I think women should want, if fertility is on their mind, I think they should want to know what those things are anyways. And they have to be careful because follicular and luteal phase offer different ranges. But it's going to depend on the individual. But iron's a very good indicator, or ferritin, or both. And vitamin D status for a female. And then, like I said, cortisol, because oftentimes they're under eating, overdoing everything. They have a life, they have a personal life, they have a career, whatever they have, they got a lot of stress. Cortisol is usually a pretty good check.
That's just like a regular person you described.
Yeah, it is. But seemingly, social media and the media in general, I think, puts more pressure on women to look a certain way. That nowadays, today, we're seeing this shift, definitely seeing a shift. You accept everybody for who the fuck they want to look like and who they are, right or wrong. That's a whole new topic. But because of the way things are changing, everything is virtual. Men are now, in my opinion, for the first time, really starting to get some social pressure to look a certain way. And I think that's why I'm getting 20-year-old kids knocking on the door for steroid advice. I'm like, you are going down a dark road here for all the wrong reasons. Again, a whole other topic, but women have been dealing with this social pressure forever. So I get it, but because of that, they have a lot more on their mind and they handle things a lot differently. They're much more complex. But there's ways that you can alleviate that. Inflammation is good acutely. Chronic inflammation is very, very bad. And everything that you do to your body that's giving it some stressor is increasing that inflammation. A diet is stress. So if you're living in a state of an energy deficit all the time, you're not getting rid of that stressor. If you have other stressors that you can't control, like an asshole boss or a rough personal life or family life or something else, you're just compounding that, and that inflammation is just chronic. Chronic inflammation, I mean, Wikipedia, Google it. I mean, it's very, very dangerous, very bad, very unhealthy. So wherever we can reduce it, we want to. And I think starting with fitness is an easy place to reduce it. We want to cause an acute inflammatory response, i.e. the training session. Then we want to deal with it. And dieting for certain periods of time is necessary for certain goals, but it shouldn't be all the time. And all they're doing is causing physiological adaptations in a negative way that's going to affect their long-term sustainability and health markers. And you mentioned earlier bone density. If they're not strength trained, I don't want to get too far off the rail with this topic, but if they're not strength trained, i.e. lifting weights that are challenging them, they're not giving an adaptation for that bone density to increase or remain. Sets of 12 and 15 to get a pump is not going to do it. If they're enhanced, maybe. But if they're not, they got to be in that 80, 85% rep max range, which is heavy weight on a female. And so they have to be doing that to stimulate that bone adaptation. And if they don't do that, they're running the risk of that bone mineral density loss over time. And it's not a coincidence that there's more hip fractures in females than males. That's not a made up stat. That's more common because on average, men are lifting and women aren't.
So getting back to all this emotional and mental kind of aspects of bikini preps and whatnot, sounds let me know if it sounds about right, that it would be nice if anyone who's trying to do that, first of all, have a good solid group of people that support them and are not judging them on their looks alone. I think that's a really important aspect. And more important than that, you can look amazing and be unhealthy. So always focus on health first, even though we know bikini prep is not healthy, and acknowledge how long you can push before it gets probably detrimental, and more sometimes it can be extremely hard to recover. Like marathon runners will be one of those people who can suffer sometimes 5, 6, 7 years. I know personally a guy who ran himself into the ground and couldn't run for 7 years because he harmed himself so much just from running. So if you
Yeah.
just diet and diet and diet and diet and think you just need to be leaner, 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 smaller, smaller, you might get to the point where you're just miserable altogether and none of it was worth it.
Yeah, and all these 100%, all these things are very slow movers. They don't come after a 12-week prep. They come after 5 years of doing the same shit. Like, so you're not going to catch it until you've realized it because something broke or something's not working or a health marker's out of whack. You're not going to tank an A1C from a 12-week prep. You know what I mean? So like it's very true. It sounds, I don't know what it sounds like to women. I don't know if they just don't want to hear it because they'd rather just, I've heard people say it's nothing feels as good as skinny looks. Like that's like a phrase I've heard many times. And if you're stuck in that mindset, I don't know what to say. I feel sorry for you, but
the main focus to get someone just mentally clear and enjoying themselves is focus on health first, because let's be honest, if you are healthy, you're going to be pretty lean. You're going to look fairly good.
100%. 100%. And if you feel good, everyone around you, including people that love you, will also feel good. And if you don't, everyone around you, including people that love you, won't.
Yeah, awesome. I think we're going to round up just on that. Appreciate your time, Scott, and chat to you next video.
Sounds good. Thanks.